Good morning, Chairman.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. Welcome to the meeting of Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. My name is Councillor Robert Parker, and I'm Chair of the Board. I'd also like to welcome all members and officers in attendance today. The video feed of this meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website, and I'd also like to welcome members of the press and public who may be watching our meeting today. We're expecting a number of executive councillors and executive support councillors. Councillor Martin Hill, Hilton Spratt, welcome Hilton, and Mark Whittington. Okay. Okay, thanks for the tip. Okay, welcome to the following members of the corporate leadership team: Debbie Barnes, Chief Executive; Glenn Garrard, Executive Director for Adult Care and Community Wellbeing; and Andy Gutherson, Executive Director for Place. He's joining us via Teams. As usual, I'd like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There's no fire drill planned this morning, so in the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber as usual through the back doors behind you and leave the building through the reception area and assemble in the front car park. Can I please remind everyone to ensure their mobiles and devices are on silent. Also, when invited to speak, can you please ensure that you switch on your microphone, otherwise those attending the meeting via Teams and members of the press and public listening in won't be able to hear you. Please be aware that you need to speak directly into the microphone to be heard. If you want to ask a question during the course of the meeting, can you please raise your hand, and my Vice Chair, Councillor Tom Smith, will make a note of those who wish to speak. Okay, so if we move to the agenda, item 1, apologies for absence and replacement members. Rachel.
Thank you, Chairman. We have received apologies from Councillor Rob Kendrick, and we have also received apologies from Andrew Crookham, Executive Director for Resources.
Chairman, an extra apology from Councillor Nigel Pepper.
Thank you. Okay, item 2, declarations of councillors' interests. As usual, members of the board are reminded they only need to declare any relevant interest which have not been declared on their declaration of pecuniary interest form. Do any members wish to declare an interest? No? Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of June 2022. What we're here to do is to confirm and for me to sign the minutes from the last meeting of the board on the end of June. First of all, can I go through it? Does anybody want to raise any points in relation to page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9? Nope. Okay, I'll sign those afterwards. So, do I have a proposer and a seconder for the minutes, please? Yep. Councillor Brooks, are you seconding?
I'll second, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Okay, so all those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. So, thank you. That's the minutes agreed then. Thank you. Okay, if we now move to item 4, announcements by the Chair, Executive Councillors and Chief Officers. Okay, I'll begin. I attended the last meeting of the Executive on the 5th of July and presented this board's comments on the Integrated Care Partnership and procurement of the County Council's Telephony system and review of financial performance for 2021-2 and also the Corporate Plan's Success Framework. In relation to our comments on the financial performance, which we discussed, and the suggestion about using the ring-fence funding for civil parking enforcement to recruit additional parking attendants, it was highlighted at the Executive that this was a difficult role to recruit to, and the important factor was to ensure that the enforcement officers were deployed to the right areas. It was also highlighted that there would be some changes coming to civil parking enforcement, including civil parking enforcement officers being able to enforce more, such as yellow boxes and obstructions, which I can't help but feel will be very welcome in our urban areas. With regards to our comments on the telephony system procurement and the concerns raised by the use of AI bots, it was highlighted at the executive there was a concern about not using AI bots to the detriment of the service. The council provided a range of services, some of which were transactional and could be supported by AI, such as renewing library books. AI could also be used to assist in providing information to the call handlers. However, it was acknowledged that for some areas of work, such as adults or children's services, there would still be a need to speak to somebody in person. Okay, so that's my announcements. We now move to Executive Councillor announcements. Are there any councillors' announcements? Councillor Hill's not here yet, I don't think. Hilton, have you got anything to announce to us?
Not today. Not today, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, Chief Officer's announcements. Debbie, sorry.
No, nothing from me, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if we now move to item 5, consideration of call-ins. Rachel, have we got any call-ins to consider?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. And finally, consideration of councillor call for action. Have we got any councillor calls for action?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Fine, we now move to the substantive items on the agenda, which is item 7, the Corporate Plan Success Framework for the current year, quarter 1. And we've got a report here from Andrew McLean, who's Assistant Director for Corporate Transformation Programmes and Performance. He will give a report and then we can question him based on that report. Thank you. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So the report that's been provided covers quarter 1 of this financial year and gives a detailed overview of some of those key observations for how we're performing against our corporate plan. In addition to this, it also shows the performance of 2 specific measures that OSMB have with regards to specific responsibility, which are PI 95 regarding capital receipts and PI 101 on the Vinci Facilities contract. Details of these can be found on pages 63 through to 66 on your report. In terms of the actual corporate plan reporting, you'll recall from previous reports that we have 2 ways in which we report our performance. So the first is through some activities, and these are those major projects, transformation activity, areas of continuous improvement, and also our strategic change activities, which really underpin the delivery of the corporate plan. And there's also our key performance indicators, which is that specific quantitative data, comparisons and measures. Full details of each activity and every key performance indicator can be found on the Council's website, and hopefully I've had a chance to review some of those interactive online dashboard which we're continuously developing, and if there's any feedback on that, always welcome to receive it. In addition, a full list of activities are able to be found in the report, and this is found on Appendix A on page 47. So focusing on the activities to begin with, of the 39 that we can report on this quarter, 32 are rated as green and are progressing as we were planned. 7 of them are rated as amber at the moment, which means that a current milestone is either slightly behind, but the overall activity is still on plan. Now these are set out in pages 23 to 25 in your pack, and those rated as amber include A12, which is linked to the reuse and recycling of waste across the county, A13, which is linked to extra care accommodation for older people and supported housing for working age adults, Age 17, which is regarding maximising independence across adult care, A53, which is linked to develop a Lincolnshire Prevention Alliance for better mental health, A21 regarding the development of our integrated care system governance arrangements, A34, which is there to work with partners to enhance community safety with a particular focus on prevention and early intervention, and A43, which is to implement improved recruitment and retention processes to attract and retain talent within the council. The details and narratives explaining why they're amber are presented in the report. There are no key activities that are rated red this quarter. However, an update is provided on activity A23, which was reported as red in quarter 4 of the last financial year. And details of that and an update on where we're at with that can be found on page 62 within Appendix A. So outside of activities, we have our key performance indicators. And you recall that we have 2 types of key performance indicators reported within the report. There's those where we set an ambition or a target that's been set, and there is those where there is a general judgment around how performance has been made, more of a contextual measure. So of those key performance indicators where a target has been set, 20 are now able to be compared with an updated position for Q1. The detail of these is set out from pages 25 through to 38. So of those 20 key performance indicators, 4 of those are exceeding the target, which are represented by a gold star in the report, and are in relation to the percentage of pupils in outstanding and good schools, percentage of household waste to landfill, customers' level of satisfaction, and voluntary and community groups actively supported in Lincolnshire. 10 of them have achieved their set ambition, and then there are 6 measures that are not meeting their ambition. These relate to the early resolution of contacts to our customer service centre, the number of days lost to sickness absence, access to volunteer opportunities, how we improve the interaction in relation to adult safeguarding inquiries, also in relation to a new national formula for recycling rates, which is impacted at the moment by only 3 of the 7 districts having the purple bin collections at this moment in time. And also regarding recycling in the recycling at our household recycling centres, which has been due to the recent dry weather and the reduction in garden waste. The second type of key performance indicator are those contextual ones, and they can be found from page 39 in the report. These don't have that ambition set, but the overall rating has been provided by the relevant executive director. Section 4.7 of the report, which is on page 41, shows 2 measures where there has been a delay in reporting the data nationally, so unfortunately at this point we're unable to provide performance at Q1, and both of these relate to current rates of employment. We'll now hand over to any questions. Thank you.
Fine. Questions? Anybody want to raise a point on any of the issues in the paper or anything? Yep. Yep, over to you, Councillor Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for this. Can I ask you some questions on page 38, please? It's to do with the staff absence. I notice we're talking about 8.82 days being above the sickness target of 7.5 days. Now, okay, it's above the target, but actually given the complete disruption that there has been to people's health and people emerging back into society and catching up on their illnesses as it were, I think that's pretty good going. It may not be where we want to be, but it isn't outrageous. There has been an awful lot in the press, certainly on my news feeds, about because people have been isolated and are still isolating to some extent, that a lot of the usual winter illnesses are actually coming out at different times of the year. For instance, the RSV, the respiratory viruses. And so people are becoming quite ill with these at unexpected times. But the thing I wanted to raise particularly was the mental health issue. More and more, I've been dealing with issues in my division around this, and I'm very, very concerned about the long-term effect of the isolation. I think the damage is only just starting to emerge, really. And I'm wondering, what can we do as a council a little more to help our staff through this? Because, I mean, a lot of our staff might live alone in the way other people do. Some councillors have experienced it. And these are the people that have got to help the people in the community. So I'm just wondering what we can do to give more support, because it really is an awful situation for some people. So there's my comments and question. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Tony might want to come in, but yeah, you're absolutely right. The data is around, there's a lot of sickness in relation to cold and flu in terms of high numbers of that, but the overall number of days lost is very much in relation to mental health. The report does set out certain areas that we are investing in heavily within our staff around the mental health first aider provision, which launched in October, running resilience workshops and mindfulness sessions for staff to support those staff, the employee support and counselling team, having well-being check-ins available for staff, and there's new support working with our specialised mental health practitioners too, as well as the recent launch of a fitness challenge around 1U Lincolnshire. So there's a lot that's been going on and investing in that and discussing that at staff briefings as well with staff. I don't know if Tony's anything further you want to add.
I think Andrew's covered quite extensively in terms of some of the things that we're doing around mental health. So thanks, Andrew. I think one of the things that I was going to pick up in the next item was just around, if you look at sickness absence from a benchmarking perspective, looking at our peers in the other county councils, you'll see that we are performing in, well, certainly in Q4 we were one of the lowest sickness absences, so it picks up, Councillor Brockwell, on the point you're making.
Yeah, of course you can.
Just very briefly, not on this. Ryan, there's a huge amount of background noise on the loop. Is there anything you can do about it, please? Thank you.
Okay. Debbie.
Thank you. Just really to add to it, the mental health challenges, I think, are related to COVID and clearly what people experienced during lockdown. But also because of some of the workforce challenges we've got, that means there's even more demand placed on those areas where they are hard to recruit. And so that sort of challenge really in terms of the impact of lockdown, clearly the workforce challenges, as people become under even more pressure within the workplace. If they've got a choice, we're seeing more over 50s retiring early, because again, COVID has helped them take a bit of a restock about home work-life balance. So again, lots of work that we're doing, which I'm sure Tony will go on to in the next paper as well, around recruitment and retention. But it is all interlinked, so that there's unintended consequences. So it isn't just one thing; it's a number of things. So whilst you've got staff working under pressure, you've got people worried about the the inflationary costs, you've got the impact of lockdown, so it's a number of things I think that we need to look at in supporting our staff, not just one issue.
Yeah, did you want to come in? Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Chairman. Please may I have a paper agenda? I've tried to make it work online, but I just can't. Thank you. You used to post them out to me. I don't get them anymore.
Did you want to speak, Alex?
No, sorry.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, sure, Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. What has caused the substantial drop in P60, which Andrew alluded to earlier, which is about being asked, the client basically being asked what they would like from an adult safeguarding inquiry? And my second point, Chairman, with respect to the mental health, which has already been touched on, do we have an approximation in terms of time when the new service of assessment priority referral to mainstream services and trauma support might come on stream? Thank you.
I just want to raise a point which links this paper, as Tony and Debbie said, with the next paper, because on page 38 we recognise that, that since the summer months attributed to difficulty experienced by staff in the current environment and where people are stretched due to staff vacancies. Okay, so I understand that, okay, but in one sense we are appreciably higher than most of the other councils within our group. Okay, and there's a difference significantly between our position and I think it's Kent. Okay, so in a sense, I wondered if we could explain any particular reason for turnover. One would have thought potentially that Lincolnshire would have been relatively immune relatively from some of the areas like Kent particularly, where there would be more opportunities. So it's the link between the two that I'm particularly interested in. You referred to that.
Yeah, of course. So I can pick up Councillor Smith's point as well in term, and yourself, Councillor Parker. So in terms of just to pick up the question around the mental health service, so they plan to work in partnership with Lincolnshire Partnership NHS Trust around their staff wellbeing service for the priority referral, and has not yet been concluded on the basis of capacity issues within the NHS Trust, and so they were unable to provide us with that service. But what we do have is already in partnership with NHS colleagues is that we are part of their staff health and wellbeing hub. So there is a platform in which the workforce can phone that and get assistance and help through that, where there are concerns about their own mental health or that of somebody else. The priority referral process is still in place. So if that was put in place during COVID, and if a member of staff, it is felt following discussion with the Health and Wellbeing Hub, needs referral to psychological therapies within the NHS community, then they can be directed in that way through a priority referral. So that is still going. I guess it was just the add-on we were looking for that yet isn't in place due to the unfortunately due to the capacity of the service that was going to provide it. And I think Andrew's mentioned quite a lot there around the other investments we've made within mental health. Just picking up on the turnover question, Councillor Parker, and where we fit currently against other councillors. Obviously, this is done by quarter. In quarter 3, we were very in the sort of best performing areas, and quarter 4 has seen quite a significant jump, like you say, and that we are the highest in that. I think there's a number of reasons why that is. I think Debbie alluded to it because of the fact that there has been a significant shrinking of those available for work. Why that is specific to Lincolnshire is difficult to put a particular sort of reason for that. But I think, some of the bigger issues are that within our children's services, we've been competing against some councils that are offering quite high agency rates, which has led to some turnover where people can be paid very well and we can resign from a substantive post and go and work on agency. And so I think there's a whole host of reasons why people were leaving in that quarter. I think the thing that I was going to mention was in my next item was that I think what we'll see in quarter 1 is that there'll be certainly in terms of the comparison with our county councils, which is always a quarter behind the information we're presenting here. I think we'll see that our performance has improved in that the indicators on turnover are that we've started to touch wood plateau, stabilise that position hopefully because of the attraction and retention initiatives we've put in place around apprentices, around incentive payments and such like that. So I hope that helps in terms of answering that.
Looking forward to getting the next quarter's report to see whether or not that's the case. Okay. Alex, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So the new corporate plan, obviously I've seen this sort of come around a couple of times now, and I raised some concerns publicly about a measure that was removed from a previous corporate plan that said about how many people, the percentage of adults that were at risk felt that that were subject to a safeguarding inquiry felt that the source of risk was a service provider. That was then changed in the next plan, or proposed to be changed, to the percentage of adults who were subject to a Section 42 inquiry. I don't see either of those measures in this corporate plan. The only measure I do see, which interestingly hasn't been achieved either, is the percentage of people who were asked what outcomes they wanted to achieve during an adult safeguarding inquiry. And it'd be interesting to see who came up with that question, because you'll find that if we use children as an example, a lot of children that are subject to safeguarding inquiries, most often than not, want to go back to their parents, who can in fact be the cause of the damage. So I'm not quite sure where that question came from or where the other two measures have gone. It is something that I've raised previously, and you know, I'm coming to the end of my term now, and I still haven't really had a satisfactory answer. So if anybody would like to point me out where I'm going wrong or what have you, that would be really greatly appreciated.
Thanks for that, Alex.
Thank you.
Do you want to come back? Somebody?
Alex, your microphone's still on.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Smith asked a question about the page 34 graph, which indicates a drop on the people who were asked about their outcomes following a safeguarding inquiry. That's a data capture problem, which I'm hoping will be corrected for Q2. The performance itself is not expected to have dropped by that much. It is entirely about how Mosaic is working. Would you like me, Chair, to try and pick up on Ms Sawyer's question about adult safeguarding as well? Thank you. So, this is something that's been debated at Adult Scrutiny Committee twice now, and it's largely related to the number of contacts that we receive that actually are no further action, because they're not safeguarding per se, they reflect quality concerns, which ties in with the comment about providers where safeguarding concerns are being raised. So if I give you an example, pressure sores. Depending upon how bad the pressure sore is, it can either be a safeguarding inquiry or a genuine quality concern. The two are very distinct and very different. One might lead to further visits by district nurses. The other one might lead to a safeguarding inquiry, depending upon whether it's a level 1 pressure sore or a level 4 pressure sore. Older people tend to have less subcutaneous fatty tissue. And if someone sees a pressure sore, they will often refer it to a safeguarding, as a safeguarding matter, but it actually isn't. And that's where the complication comes in. The committee has asked officers to look at whether, as a safeguarding board, we can revise that picture so that we only look at safeguarding inquiries, not the general concerns that tend to come to us and are actually wasting time because they're not the right response.
Sure. Do you want to, did you say you wanted to come back?
I'd love to, thank you. So in terms of adult safeguarding then, is this the only measure that we have? And I'd just like to point out how it has changed from how people felt that the source of risk was the service provider, which was the first measure, and over 55% of them did, so let's not forget that, to the second, new measure, which was the number of safeguarding inquiries that were subject to a level 42. So that's somebody thinking they're being, robbed, and it turns out they weren't. To now this. Is this the only measure that we've got for adult safeguarding inquiries in this corporate plan, which is the percentage of people who are asked what outcomes they wanted to achieve? And surely that's not the point of a safeguarding inquiry. It's not about what the victim or person that is subject to it wants to achieve, is it? Because often a safeguarding inquiry can be raised by somebody third hand.
Thank you, Chair. So this is one of those distinct characteristics of adult safeguarding, which is if the person has capacity in law, it's their choice as to what should happen following a concern being raised.
Is this the only measure for adult safeguarding on the corporate plan?
Thank you, Chair. No further work is underway to increase the number of measures around safeguarding that we have.
So this is the only measure for adult safeguarding on Lincolnshire County Council's corporate plan today, and that measure, which I shall read out now, which hasn't been achieved, is PI 60, percentage of people who were asked what outcomes they wanted to achieve during an adult safeguarding inquiry. That's correct, is it?
That is correct.
Thank you. No further questions.
If I might, Chair, expand on that, the context I think is important, which is that there are a range of measures both at directorate level and corporately that we use, and also a number of measures which the Safeguarding Adult Board receive. So this is, as it were, a very thin slice of a much deeper picture.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. You okay? Fine. Okay, does anybody else want to raise anything in relation to this? Great. Debbie and Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really to come back on the point around adult safeguarding. As a suggestion, I think it may be helpful if we were to do some benchmarking with other local authorities to see what other performance indicators are measured in relation to adult safeguarding across other county councils, and then review that in light of that search, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, the LGA's done some work and stuff like that. Yeah.
Great. We'll take that away. Thank you.
Hugo.
Thank you. Actually, my question's not quite related to... There's two parts now, because you've mentioned adults so much. I think Glenn said it very well, that, you know, it's the thin edge of a wedge, in effect, and the thin end is here with one line, and actually give it credit. It's on the corporate plan, which is very good news. Then when you dive down into safeguarding itself, which is very complicated and comes from all sorts of different angles, adult scrutiny dives into it. We also have a safeguarding panel which dives into it, and we've got a new chairman of safeguarding, you know, as an independent sort of organisation to the council. So all in all, there is a phenomenal amount of work that goes into ensuring safeguarding is absolutely spot on, and we're doing a great job on it. In fact, we had a peer review some years ago on it just to even make sure. So I think credit needs to be given that actually we do and take it very seriously and do dive into it. My actual question comes back to waste performance. And as an avid fan of anti-waste, I think actually we can do more. I know we have this here, and there's new benchmarking figures put in place, and I know it's not necessarily LCC either, it's the Waste Partnership. But when we look at recycling, and you walk down a high street, you pull up in a car park, you pull up in a lay-by, do we provide any recycling anywhere there? The only form of recycling is letting it deteriorate and fall to natural wastage. You know, a lot more can be done in recycling. When I go abroad, there's recycling bins everywhere throughout airports. All bins have a block of 3, metal, glass, paper, disposable, 4 even. And actually, we really don't go enough. All we keep looking at is household waste. But are we not householders when we're walking down the street discharging our sandwiches or fish and chip wrappers? You know, even Skegness was on the thing the other day about collection of waste. You know, we actually don't put enough bins and collection stuff out there. And I think, you know, if people don't recycle, it can end up being just dumped. And there's no sort of comparative figure, but I know we need to get our recycling better because it costs us a lot of money when we run contaminated waste. But still, when I'm at home, I battle with my kids because no one knows what to put in which bin. Whether it's a pizza box, where does it go? Well, actually, it can't go in recycled now because it's had food in it, so it must go in the black bin. And it gets to the point that it's got too complicated for people. It really has got complicated. We can do a lot better if we made it simple messages. And I think that's what I'd like to see more. And I'd like to see definitely no red and actually a vast improvement. But that's down to the Waste Partnership to actually do more, I think. So I'd jack it up even higher. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comment you want to make?
Certainly can take that feedback back. I don't know if Andy Gutherson, who's on Teams, wants to come in at all to respond to any specific points raised.
Okay. Can I pick up on what Hugo's been talking about in relation to waste and recycling? On page 23, we can see that we're still waiting for some announcement from government. And I wondered, what impact does that have? What are we expecting from government? Are we going to be given more powers? Can you tell us a bit more about the Environment Act, the consequences of it?
Councillor Parker, if I can perhaps assist. Yeah, so starting off with Councillor Marfleet's observations, he is right in the context of the collective responsibility for our dealing with recycling as a waste partnership issue, not just for the county council. So the indicators that are reported at the moment in the corporate plan relate directly to our role as the disposal authority, not the collection authority. There are various initiatives being worked through with the partnership to improve the quality of our overall approach to waste disposal. One which obviously is in the process of being rolled out is the separate collections for paper and card. As Councillor Marfleet's flagged as well, that does create then that confusion or potential for confusion in the context of what you do with certain types of waste. The messaging that is out there is, I think, a lot clearer than it maybe was 3 or 4 years ago, but it's still part and parcel of an educational campaign that's required to make sure that everyone is fully aware of what they need to actually dispose of in their waste. The next district to go live with the paper and card separate collections is East Lindsey from September, so that'll be 4 out of the 7 districts will then be in that situation. Our recycling rates have improved as a consequence of doing that, and the quality of recyclable materials is beneficial in the context of how we can actually make good use of that in the commercial marketplace. In terms of the Environment Act, the issues that are likely to come forward from that will again be about different approaches to the disposal of different types of waste. So the one particular one that we're expecting to be at the forefront of the Environment Act changes is in relation to how we dispose of food waste. So again, in terms of the different waste streams that we create, the amount of waste that we all create as households, food waste is another of those sort of like waste streams, which obviously is adding to the overall level of our waste disposal. Better and more effective disposal of food waste, better and more effective use of that as a material to then fuel other activities, again, is an expectation. So what we're expecting to come out of that is the opportunity to look again at different types of waste disposal that could develop facilities like anaerobic digester facilities. So again, the food waste creates a fuel, which again can be used to heat or power either properties, vehicles and such like. So they're the type of initiatives we're expecting that the Environment Act will bring forward.
Anyone else want to comment before we move to the discussion? I've finished the discussion. No? No? Okay. So the situation before us is that we're here to provide the executive with information about how the council is performing against the corporate plan, and the recommendation is that the performance for 2022-23 as at the 30th of June be considered and noted. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? No. So we will put together a report that I will take to the executive at the next meeting. If we could now move to the next item on the agenda, which is the People Management Update Q1, and we did go into that just a little bit. So, Tony, your report.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. The paper in front of you will see is when we've touched upon this to some extent already this morning, is the HR management information data for Q1 and a high-level summary of some of the people strategy projects that we are currently on with. In terms of the management information, so I'm conscious we have already spoken about a large part of this morning. Just to sort of, just to reiterate, we have a picture of sickness absence, if I start with that, where compared to our peers, we are performing well in Q4. Q1, you'll have seen there is a reduction in sickness absence as well. So in terms of our performance on that and the initiatives we're putting in place around that, we appear to be stabilising that situation. And whilst we are above our target, given some of the things that we talked about this morning, in terms of the more winter type viruses that occurred last summer and into the autumn and this year, that is one of the reasons why it's above, and because obviously we've had to restabilise following the pandemic. In terms of turnover, obviously again we've touched upon this. Our turnover has been steadily rising since the resumption of normality, shall we say, from the lifting of lockdowns and returns to work. That is no different to a lot of organisations. I think quarter one has seen again what I would class as a stabilisation of that particular figure. The increase from quarter four to quarter one is only slight, and I'll come on to that in terms of the attraction and retention framework we've put in place, hoping that that's had an impact on that. Certainly when you look at the monthly figures, it's been a fluctuating situation in quarter one, where we've had a lower figure, a higher figure, and then a lower figure again in June. So there's some hope there that position won't get any worse, and that with some of the interventions we're doing around attraction and retention, these will help. Agency spend, you'll note, has reduced in quarter one compared to quarter four, which it is welcome in one sense, in that there is a reduction in that expenditure. What it can sometimes mean is that we've lost agency staff in roles that we need filling, but in terms of the actual budget for that and the funding for that has reduced, which is good. We do know that there has been some successful sort of recruitment campaigns in the quarter as well, and we can also see that employments have further increased in quarter one, so that will be another reason why that has reduced. So we've also talked there about the council performance in comparison with some of the local government association benchmarking. Sickness I won't labour on again. Labour turnover, quarter four. As I'll reiterate, we're always a quarter behind when it comes to the benchmarking figures. Again, yeah, we were the highest turnover in that quarter, but as I've said, I'm hopeful that and fairly confident that will not be the case in quarter one because of the stabilisation. But obviously, we wait to see on that in terms of those figures next time I present this report. In terms of people strategy update, again, we've touched upon a number of these, but attraction and retention, clearly one of the biggest priorities from the workforce at the moment, given all the issues that we've just talked about. Just to confirm that earlier this year, we introduced the attraction and retention framework, which was a proposal solution of short, medium and long-term interventions, which to help services try and stabilise or grow their workforce. It's fair to say that some of the pressure points within there have been around, for example, social work, have been legal roles, IMT and so on. What we have seen in social work is that there's been a positive response from the workforce in respect of retention and the use of a retention payment, in that we saw, certainly in the last quarter, there was nobody who had served notice of resignation, which we'd had in previous quarters, which is a positive indicator. And legal as well have introduced a retention payment too, along with commercially. We're also looking to do that, which we hope will have a positive influence on the figures. I think one of the the big things that I think is most pleasing that the council has done is the introduction of a significant investment in a grow your own model. And I think we've had grow our own models before, obviously, but I think they have been not to the size and number that the council has committed to. And I think the expansion of the trainee social workers, for example, in the children's service, with a commitment to sort of 14, 15 social workers year on year for the next 3 years, is a real commitment and should close some of the areas of the gaps with respect to the vacancies that we've got in that area, and also retain people to work who work and train in Lincolnshire, which is I think is a real positive. So I think there's a number of incentives there on attraction retention, which will, you know, I'm not saying we're out of the woods yet at all, but I think that we'll make a positive contribution to that position. Following on from that, you'll see obviously there's been an increase as well in the number of apprenticeships on roll, which again is positive. If we compare that to the figure earlier this year, that was in around 260. So again, we've seen a positive increase in the number of apprenticeships. I won't mention anything more on health and wellbeing. I think my colleague Andrew McLean gave a significant update around the incentives, the initiatives that we've put in place around that, and I think it's fair to say we're doing, as an organisation, again, we're doing our very utmost in terms of investment and support to our staff, particularly around mental health, which is a real positive. I suppose just picking out now just a couple more of the areas that I just wanted to mention. From an equality diversity perspective, we're in the area now where we're just producing our annual report, which is a statutory duty under the Public Sector Equality Duty of the Equality Act 2010. And it'll be the first report as such of that, which is quite extensive, which we will be able to assess the workforce in terms of where the gaps are, where the things are that we need to do, I guess, to meet some of those areas of being an employer of choice, and to assist with some of our recruitment and retention issues. But that'll be something that will be we'll be going to CLT colleagues in September, and then for publication thereafter, which is a positive, but it'll give us a clear sort of benchmark of where we are, and perhaps where we need to be as well. And the final item I just wanted to raise was just that we are now about halfway through our culture and leadership diagnostic stock take, which is, you know, essentially everyone being aware about an assessment of the how we do things around here test. We've been lucky enough to have around 70 employees who volunteered to be part of what is our culture change team, and been assisting us with the 4 work streams that are identified within the report. Some of those pieces of work have now completed, which is the senior leader interviews and the survey, but some of the others around focus groups and the dashboard are ongoing. What we're aiming to do is have a report to be able to give us an indication of what the workforce is saying around culture and leadership in around sort of November time, when we can obviously then have a discussion about what that means, what the workforce is saying, and how we bridge that gap. So I'll pause there, Chair, in terms of wait for any questions. Thank you.
A lot, Tony. Questions, starting with Hilton and then Marianne.
No questions really, Chairman. If I can just back up what Tony said, 2 points I want to make. First of all, which he made rather more eloquently than I can, the grow your own staff. So I won't mention that any further, but just obviously fully support that. Tony used a key word, back to or 2 words, back to normality. Interesting. I just want to make a general comment on that as far as recruitment and retention are concerned. because I think since COVID and this back to normality, the new normality, as it were, people of all ages, people of all walks of life, people of all job roles, in my opinion, have re-evaluated their lives in terms of work-life balance. And that's going to have a significant impact, not just on this council, but on employers and employees up and down the country, I think it's fair to say, Chairman. But it will also have a further consequence for the economy as a whole, and that is the likelihood is that it will increase inflationary pressure within the general economy. So I just wanted to make that point, Chairman, because as Tony's correctly said, we pointed out the policies of the county, but it's a bigger picture, and I think you have to look at the entire context, if I may, Chairman, to see where we are within that entire context. Thank you, Chairman.
Any comments on that, Tony?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Spratt. I think the point is that we know evidentially that there are at least 500,000 people, and likely more, that are no longer available in the job market across the UK as a consequence of the pandemic and that reassessment, and inevitably that will have an impact on across the whole country, which we have seen with all the vacancies that we've got. So I just wanted to sort of add a bit of context to that I think it's much more than that, but certainly at least 500,000 people no longer available.
Marianne.
Apologies, Chairman. Phil Dilks did ask me to come today because he's on holiday, but I'm not sure that the message got entirely through to the office, so I apologise. I'm supposed to be substituting, but it's a bit sudden, so apologies for that. I don't know how you want to deal with that.
We can sort that out afterwards.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Carry on.
The comment I wanted to add was whether the council had considered having a process where refugees could at least get as far as the interview stage if they applied for jobs. Clearly, as you rightly point out, a lot of people have left the job market, but we do also have a number of refugees who are looking for jobs currently, and I just wondered if the council had considered that as a policy, as it is done in some council areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. Sorry, Chair. Yeah. Oh, apologies. I think I think that point is a very good point. I think there's two issues. One is we just need to take that away. One is about employability and whether or not the refugees that have come, particularly from Ukraine, and their rights to work. Now, my understanding is they do have the ability to work. And then there's the broader point about priority interviews and guarantee of interviews. But I'm happy to take that away and talk with CLT colleagues about that as a principle. Thank you, and apologies for the incorrect.
No problem. It's Councillor Overton. Sorry. Thank you.
Make sure that that information's passed over when I report to the executive on Tuesday. Okay. Yep. Anybody else? Jackie.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a very interesting report. I was particularly interested on page 71 in the concept of equality, diversity and inclusion. Now, I went on a bit of a rant in communities about that when they were referring to equalities, etc., within the fire service, and I felt they'd been given an unfair hammering. But I pursued my thinking on it. And it takes a while perhaps to understand that equality doesn't necessarily mean offering the same thing to everybody, and it doesn't even necessarily mean offering the same opportunity to everybody. Equality of access is an important thing, and I think I would like to see perhaps a little bit more emphasis on the equality of access, because that then includes the person's choice. But more than that, for me, an ideal situation would be where a member of staff would be able to take control of their own equality, would have the confidence to let it be known or to bring forward the idea that they do or don't feel that they have been treated with equality. Sometimes equality is something that's done to people as a concept rather than an involvement of the people concerned. Now, I'm very pleased to see that you have appointed a diversity, equality and inclusion lead. And I would be interested in having a conversation with that to get a better understanding of the council's thinking in relation to my own thinking on this, because with me it's a developing idea because of the fire service business, and I would like to take it a bit further. So would it be possible to facilitate that opportunity for me, please? Thank you.
Sure, there's a quick answer to that, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Lucy Chevel is our Equality and Diversity. She is an existing member of staff who agreed to pick that portfolio up. So she, and I'll make sure she makes contact. Thank you.
Thank you. Just going back on the point about people who are here from Ukraine, over 800 people and growing. I just thought it might be both encouraging and reassuring that working with the social care providers in the county, we were able to secure our first Ukrainian employee a couple of weeks ago. One of the biggest challenges is actually securing references. But we've had a lot of support from the DWP, who have agreed to provide references where possible to secure employment, and that will continue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay. I just want to pick up a point, Tony, about that report, the HR Equality, Diversity and Inclusion report. You mentioned that it will be coming to us. I don't see it in the forward plan at the moment. I just wondered if you could give us an indication as to when we can see it.
Yeah, of course. I would think by the next meeting we should be in a position to share that report with you. So my normal people management update, which is I think November time, it will be available then to come and bring to this meeting.
Thanks. Anybody else want to raise anything on this particular item? Well, I'm sure it's been captured, the conversations that we've had, and they'll be passed on to the executive. Okay, so what we've got to do is agree the... Did we get assurances on HR management information, and did we review the progress? I think we did. Would you, if you agree with that, please indicate. Any abstentions? Anybody say no? Okay, well that will be passed on. Thank you. If we could move now to item 9, which is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for Quarter 1, and it's Michelle Grady, Assistant Director Finance. Michelle.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So this is the first of 2 reports that I'm presenting this morning that bring you the Quarter 1 position for our revenue and capital budget monitoring. So the report the revenue report starts at page 83 in your pack, and this is what will be presented to Executive on the 6th of September. The report summarises our forecasts against our revenue budget approved for the current financial year, and the appendices that start with a table on page 90 give you a bit more detail about the variances reported, and also provide some updates on the use of our reserves and our development fund initiatives. The current forecast variance, excluding schools, is an overspend of £705,000. This predominantly relates to overspends in children's services around the external placement cost of children in care and children's social care legal costs, which is being offset by the use of one-off grants and staff vacancies in this area. This is a minor variance, it's 0.1%, which is often expected in Quarter 1. We are, however, starting to see the impact of inflation on our budgets, as we would expect, which is creating pressures in year, particularly around potential staff pay, utilities and some contracts. Just by way of background, this isn't in the report, but this will be coming through in Quarter 2, but to just kind of give you a bit of a flavour of what's what's coming through that we're starting to see. So whilst a pay settlement hasn't been agreed for the current year, the offer that's been made by the local government employers is around 4% over what we'd budgeted for, which is likely to create an in-year pressure of around £7 million. Our gas and electric purchased we use via ESPO. They operate a system of forward pricing and forward fixing our prices. So they did a lot of that during 2021, which has meant that we've not really seen any impact yet of the increase of the recent prices around utilities. Those contracts run to October, and they are starting to now buy into the new period. And we're seeing contract price increases of around 200% on gas and 100% on electricity from the prices we're currently paying. So that will create an in-year pressure on our budgets and will create a pressure going forward. You may recall, members may recall that when we approved the budget for the council year, when council approved the budget back in February, we increased our corporate contingency by £3.5 million. We have a current budget, had a current budget of 3, so it was increased to 6.5. We expected that we would see some price increases during the year, so that was done for that purpose. So we're going to work during Q2 just to determine what we are seeing coming through and what we expect the cost pressure to be during the current year. We're expecting some underspends in other areas, but we just need to get that total picture pulled together. So I haven't got anything else that I was going to raise in terms of the Q1 report, so happy to take any questions on the revenue budget.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Hilton.
May I just ask a quick question, Chairman, if I may? I might have misheard you, Michelle, or misinterpreted it. Did you say that there was a payoff of 4% over and above what we'd budgeted for? So can you just give me the percentage what we did budget for? So say if it was 2%, so the payoff was 6% at the end of the day then. Did I hear you right, or
you did.
Or did I interpret you right?
Yeah, you interpreted me right, you heard me right. So in our assumptions that we made back in when we was making the budget proposals in December, we had budgeted for a 2%. During the course of setting that budget, we expected it might be a bit more than that. So that was hence the additional money that went into contingency to allow for that. It's come back, the offer that's been made is a fixed offer for all grades, and I think it's £1,925. Have I got that right? Yeah, got that right. Which averages out about 6% across our pay scale. So again, that 2% over what we 4% over what we budgeted for, and even a bit more than what we actually thought it might be. So,
yeah.
Yes.
So in essence, Chairman, if I may, obviously if that is paid at the end of the day, unless we get extra money from the government, that's got to come from the council taxpayers or reserves or wherever. But generally the council taxpayer.
It will have to come from our own budgets.
Yeah,
so,
that's fine.
yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Did you want to come in, Martin?
Just on that, yes, it's quite interesting because obviously when the government gave its had its comprehensive spending review, and local government was given in effect a 3-year settlement, although the details of each year weren't allocated. The presumption then, upon the advice of the Bank of England, was that interest rates would be presumed to be 2% for the following period, and indeed there was presumption then based on that what council tax levels should be. Clearly, and I think, as Michelle said, there was quite a bit of scepticism that whether it would in fact be 2%, and obviously they are much higher. So to answer Councillor Spratt's point, there are 2 issues here. One in year, where we'll have to deal with that in year, and I think we will manage that. But all this will then go into the base budget for future years, and there is a massive cost pressure. So in answer to Councillor Spratt's point, well, obviously there's an issue for the new government, I suppose we'll call it, that how that is going to be managed, because clearly a 2 or 3% council tax increase when inflation, well, I'm not sure what base inflation is at the moment, but clearly there are some pretty horrendous figures flying around. So I think there'll be some interesting conversations to be done, because we are pretty robust financially, but there'll be some councils who are close to the financial cliff who I'm sure won't be able to manage this. So I think with all this, with all the inflation which is coming down the pack, it does down the track, I think it's fairly clear that certainly, although we'll manage this year's budget, I'm confident that there will be some interesting decisions to be made about future years, depending on what government decides to do about the changed financial environment.
Sorry, yeah, you wanted to come back.
Just a very brief comment in relation to what Michelle said about the amount, the cash amount. You said 1,900 and something, was it? And you mentioned an average of 6%. So, so if 1,900 and whatever is given, would that potentially help people on lower wages? So people on lower wages working for the council could end up with a pay rise of 9–10%, which in these very difficult times, I think you'd agree, Chairman, is a good thing to try and help without wishing to be patronising, but to help the lower paid.
Your analysis is absolutely correct, yes.
I was going to say, because Debbie and, these gang, I shouldn't be rude. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Sound. Okay. Anybody else? Yep, Marianne.
Thank you. I know you've been working with the Local Government Association and they have been putting figures together, and I'm just asking if you have contributed some from Lincolnshire, because they are, what we're trying to do is collect it's really difficult because there's so many variables, of course, but to collect a figure so that we can stab at something, so that we can have to ask for something specific, can't ask for more, we have to be specific. And I just wonder, is there a set shortfall that you can stab at, plus or minus, I know, but for in-year overspend, unexpected spends, how much we're short this year, and then a stab figure at how much in future, and ask really, have you already been, I'm sure you have, but just in case you've already been working to get an overall figure for the country, so we've got a really strong voice on that, because clearly this is a critical time with the new government coming in. Thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry, Michelle, could I just add to what Marianne said? You said how much pay awards amounted to. You mentioned the utilities, gas and electricity, and it's the rest that make up the total increase as a result of inflation, and I think that's perhaps where Marianne and I are saying much the same thing.
Yeah, so we, based on the offer that's been made for the pay award, we can calculate what that impact is in year, and obviously that is an ongoing, as the leader said, that's an ongoing impact. We have to build that into our base. It's difficult to make assumptions about what future pay offers are, but we've had to try and build that into our planning. We work quite a lot with the Society of County Treasurers, so they do quite a lot of information gathering, and I think they work with LGA and other bodies to try and lobby government around the impacts of those. And I'm sure our members do as well. So it varies across our broad of spend. So things like construction inflation, very high at the moment, impacts of national living wage, those sorts of things. So we feed that information into SCT and try and feed into the government through those routes. But if there's other routes we can take, then I'm quite happy to provide other information.
That would be useful, thank you. There's also quite a lot of work for leaders. I know Martin's done so much on this before, and one of my big points is that we did a huge amount in 2008. I mean, really significant reductions and in spend, and therefore in services, and a lot of efficiencies as well. And now, come back and ask us to do it again. That's jolly difficult, and I think that's a really key point that we need to push home. This is how much it costs. They like figures, they like evidence, as you know, and putting that together on a national scale is really useful. Thank you.
Could I just follow up on that? And Martin can come in a moment. But you've said pay awards, and you can calculate that, okay, at 4% or maybe more. The utilities, gas and electricity, we've got an idea of that. But how much do those two particular areas, not necessarily the increase for inflation, but how much do they make up compared to the rest of the budget? Because that's going to be subject to inflation as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. So our
Oh, you've hit the wrong button there, Rob.
Okay, third time lucky. Our pay budget in total is around 183 million. So that obviously a big part of our £500 million net spend that we incur every year. Contracts make up quite a lot of the rest of it, a lot of it in Glenn's area. So those contracts very much impacted by inflation. National living wage tends to be the big impact in those types of contracts. So our different contracts are impacted differently. So utilities, I'm not sure what the total for that is, but I know that the increases that we're seeing is expected to be a pressure of around 4 million across the couple of years that we're looking at contracting with them, with a pressure of about 1.6 million in this year, relating to the price increases just from October. So they are all impacted differently. As I say, construction inflation, property management, those inflation is obviously quite high, but some of that can probably be managed through the programme of work delivery. Some things you can't dial down. So there is also some lag as well. So some of our contracts are based on previous years' CPI and RPI. So we're seeing, especially with things like utilities, we get a bit of a lag. So it's difficult to say what the impact is across the total spend, but say contracting is more than half of our spend. So impacts on those differently. So that's what we're trying to gather over the summer to try and understand what the impact on all of our spend is. But big chunks of that, say, contracts in different parts of the organisation, particularly in adults.
You'll have something to tell us.
So we're working, Q2 will obviously provide an update on our forecast for the current year, and the forecast for the current year will very much impact what we think the future year's impact, because most of that will need to build into the base budget for future years. So we'll be talking to CLT and the executive after Q2, and then obviously towards the end of the year we'll be kind of looking at our budget gap and how we then deal with that.
Thanks.
Yes, I mean, just to say that local government leaders have been lobbying both of the candidates to be leader of the Conservative Party and therefore Prime Minister to make them well aware, and for what it's worth, both have given strong assurances that the local government will be looked after, which will be easier said than done if inflation continues as it is. So, and there was, I think one of them made an announcement yesterday about money going from being given to local government from the NHS, which I think is the argument being put by local government that although the extra national insurance levy, nearly all of it went to the NHS, and then the local government has been, I think, fairly sceptical that any of it would ever be rescued or come back from the NHS. So we'll see, but the NHS itself is under, even though it's had a lot more extra money, there still seems to be major problems. So they are certainly aware of the issues, and of course the other issue, this will all come out, but as I say, this year's one thing, but the base budget's another thing, and then the government will have to make some decisions on the cap on council tax levels, because at the moment they're assuming 3% for the next, was the maximum, I think, is that right, Michelle? I can't, so one of the ways they may try and plug the gap, which is unfortunate, is more adult social care levy and increasing the cap on council tax, because obviously if council tax is, general council tax is 2% and inflation is beyond 10%, that's a massive difference which will have to be dealt with. So challenging times for us, but I think even more challenging times for the government to try and balance all of this, because it's not just local government, there's lots of other services which will be saying exactly the same thing.
Thanks for that. Anybody else want? Yep, sorry.
If I may speak.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. If you allow my slight indulgence, Chairman, I'd be very appreciative. To go back to what the leader was saying, inflation is expected, according to the Bank of England, to peak in the summer of up to 18%, and that's general inflation. That is not things like construction, because that's already at about 26% when I last looked. So things are going to be very interesting, to put it mildly. I note in the revenue report that the additional monies were given for drainage investigations and for monies to be spent on B roads and lower class roads. And notwithstanding what the leader and everybody else has just said around the difficulties of finance, which is obvious to everybody, whether you're a councillor or you're running your household budget, I know that certainly in my division, and I'm sure many other members' divisions, we would, if we could, be very appreciative of trying to use the development fund to, certainly in terms of the drainage, because I know that money's been spent and the money for B roads will be spent shortly, if we could put money back into that, because they have been, certainly in my own division, I know of instances where that money has been used and it's been absolutely invaluable, but I appreciate that we're in very, very difficult financial times. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks. Sorry, yeah, Michelle.
So you're absolutely right, we've been putting some money into the development fund, and 3 million of that was used for the highway stuff last year, and the rest, 7 million, will be used during this year. But the executive approved the outturn report in July that will be coming to council in September, and there is a recommendation in there to use some of the underspend to put in towards that fund as well.
Okay, anyone else? Just a question back to Councillor Hill. On page 83, right at the bottom, is a statement from Michelle saying, "We're currently assessing the impact of high levels of inflation in the wider economy, and the results of this assessment were reported in Q2, together with any mitigating actions and any implications for financial resilience." I don't know if it's too early in the day for you to share with us your thoughts about those mitigating actions and implication for financial resilience. Mitigating actions could actually be termed as cuts. I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, obviously, as Michelle indicated, we did increase the contingency budget substantially this year, which will, under current estimates, of course we don't know for sure, will probably cover the pay increases and probably utilities, although it will depend on, because obviously we have long-term contracts. So that's the estimation. What is not still covered is the cost pressures. So obviously we are now, I've asked the Chief Exec and the Treasurer to actually look at mitigation circumstances, how we can actually manage that situation. And obviously there will be, I'm sure, a combination of how we can take some mitigation. We do have a healthy level of reserve, shall we say, obviously the much debated contingency, which is the volatility reserve, shall I say. So that work is already ongoing, and as part of the budget setting exercise, and indeed in terms of balancing the books for this year, we will be coming forward with plans later in the year to actually see how we can do that. And Debbie, I don't know what you want to add. You are doing some pretty intensive work in terms, and I think, to be fair, savings will actually be part of that. And for example, I know we've asked departments to do some scenarios about savings to see what they would look like, so then as members we can take some decisions about whether those savings would be necessary or not. But don't we have to add anything, Debbie?
Yeah, not very much to add. Thank you very much, Councillor Hill. Just really to reinforce that the executive directors are all working on in-year and longer-term sort of strategies. We're bringing together that work mid-September to share it from an officer perspective, and obviously from that then we'll be able to then start sharing some plans. But the timeline for that to come together for us for our first meeting at the corporate leadership team is mid-September.
Excuse me, anyone else want to comment? Okay. Before we move to the vote, can I just make a small point to Michelle, just for correction before this goes to the executive? On page 91, there are two figures quoted in relation to children's services is forecasting a spend of 95.491 million, and a bit further down below it becomes not 95 but 94. So perhaps that could be amended before it goes. Okay. So we've
that's already been done. Thank you.
It's not going to change the world at all, but okay, thanks. So we've had a discussion. I'll be capturing, so too will Democratic Services, what we've considered, and it will be reported to the executive. So is that agreed that the executive notes the current position on the revenue budget as I'm going to comment on when I go to the executive on Tuesday? Is that okay? Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? No. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for that. Okay. If we could now move to the next item on the agenda, which is the Capital Budget Monitoring Report, item 10, Q1. Back to you, Michelle.
Thank you. So very much again, this is a Q1 position, so quite a conservative report at the moment. We're reporting, the exec report starts at page 121 in your pack. We're currently reporting an underspend of just over £1 million on our capital programme, and they're just a couple of small variances on some of the social care programmes actually. The key message around this is again that we're currently doing quite a lot of work to look at the impact, particularly on construction inflation, on the programme that we've got, just to understand where the variances are and where we might have pressures on the projects that are already in flight. And part of the work that the Chief Exec just talked about around looking at the budgets will include looking at the capital programme as the programme goes forward, just to make sure it remains affordable and sustainable within our overall budget, because increasing the capital programme does have an impact on our revenue budget as well. So, so not a great deal in the report in terms of variances, but happy to take any questions on that.
Fine. Who wants to ask any questions? Is there nothing that we want to ask about?
Seeing none, Chairman.
Yeah.
I'm seeing any, Chairman.
Tom? Okay. Well, that's easy. Very easy. Thanks, Michelle. So we've got this underspend of 1.1 million. Just to go back to the point that was being made seriously in the last discussion is about inflation again. So could you give us any assurances or none about our capital programme in relation to inflation?
I think all of the major schemes that are in the programme have an element of contingency within the budgets that are set for them. So as you'll know, the big projects in our programme are around construction, either road or schools predominantly. The budgets, when they're set, always contain a level of contingency for unknowns. And, you know, so our budgets have already got some buffer in them. We also have the corporate contingency in the capital programme. So where projects are coming back at slightly more than they were expecting, that budget's there to help with some of those things. I think where we're seeing some pressures coming through on some of the schools build, the grants that we're getting are reflecting some of that as well. So we've been able to use particularly DFE grants around the schools for pressures that are coming through on there. I think it's just a matter of we need to work through each project and just make sure that we're budgeting correctly for what we've got in our programme that's already in flight, to make sure it remains affordable. But it does vary across, let's say our buffers in there are usually fairly able to absorb some of it. I think that the highways programme will be the big challenge, I think.
Yeah, could you give an assessment as to whether or not the inbuilt contingency in each capital scheme, together with the contingency fund, that is likely to be proportionate to what we expect inflation to be by the end of the financial year?
I doubt it's proportionate to the construction inflation that is currently running. I think on some of the bigger programmes we can maybe dial back or rephase some of the activity that we're doing, but that would need to come back to council and obviously come as part of an approval process to say that that's what we need to do. If you're asking me, have we got enough money to cover contract inflation as it's currently running, my answer will probably be no, and we might have to rephase some of our activity to reflect that. But that's the piece of work that we're currently doing, just to make sure that we remain affordable in terms of our capital ambitions.
You just want to say what rephase means?
To work within the envelope that we've got, it might mean that we have to push some schemes back in time. So to kind of just make sure our revenue budget can cope with the impact of the financing. So something that was planned to maybe start next year, maybe start in a couple of years' time instead, so we can smooth out the impacts of the inflation. But that, again, is a piece of work we need to do to, over Q2 to make sure that we're doing the right things with that.
And because this year's budget projects are being rephased, that means there needs to be some consideration of which schemes in the next financial year may have to be delayed, and there's an issue there about priorities.
There is. I think that the main priority is to finish the schemes that we've already started. So, a couple of big schemes, obviously the LEB's finished now, but Grantham Southern Relief Road, biggest major scheme that's currently in middle of flight. The North Icon Relief Road in the programme as well. We've got DFT funding to support that. The Send Schools, very much an in-flight project. So just making sure that with the stuff that's in flight is fully budgeted for, and that will be the priority. And then looking at what else is in the programme and if any of that can be slipped into later years.
And that's a process that I think should and could include scrutiny committees to be looking at those different priorities.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Chairman. It's on your point, actually. Michelle, based on what you've just said, do we have enough finance for the programme? I'm not talking about programmes that were planned a year or two in advance, because you've explained that, but programmes that we've got in flight, like the Grantham Relief Road, the North Highcombe Relief Road as well, do we have enough funds without having to be cut back to the point where they're not going to do what we want them to deliver? Do we have enough that they will be completed without having to delay them sort of 3/4, halfway through?
Can I, just to help out here, that clearly, you know, we have a very large capital programme, this council, over £150 million a year. Personally, I'm confident, as Michelle has said, all those projects which are ongoing, things like Grantham Bypass and the Spalding Road and so on and so forth, they will be delivered. And I think, as you indicated, Chairman, the council has choices now, because clearly, although some of the inflation in terms of has gone down, for example, fuel's gone down, not gas, but fuel, and some of the other material costs have actually come down quite substantially. I think it's fair to say that looking forward, I don't think if things stay as they are, because obviously still there's the wage inflation and the general inflation, that there will have to be a future look, and I think, as you've indicated, that probably will be part of the budget process going forward. So there are choices. You can increase the capital programme to accommodate the demand, or, as has been said, you can actually still do things, but things will take a little bit longer than originally anticipated, which personally, bearing in mind the size of our capital programme and therefore the size of the borrowing we have to do to service it, to me would seem to be the more financially prudent way. But there will have to be an issue, and there will be some projects, I'm sure, which are planned for now, which haven't started, which may be pushed back. There is the issue, of course, of grant funding, and I think the classic one is the Lincoln Southern Bypass, where obviously we've got £100 million from the government, and that's due for a certain time again. So there will be some projects which probably will have to happen if the government or who the grant giver has said they must happen at a certain time. But I think you're quite correct. They will have to be able to look at it, and as part of that process, obviously it should be scrutinised. So when the council comes to set its budget and future budgets, because we don't know what the new government what it's going to do. Is it going to stick with the comprehensive spending review which it put down, which I don't think is sustainable? I think they're going to have to at least have to serious look at it, so at least everybody knows what they're dealing with. So yes, there is going to have to be a review of this, and yes, in my opinion, there'll be some projects which will start a little bit later than we would have originally thought they would.
Thanks. Maybe a little bit later if inflation does come down, but maybe some time if inflation remains at a high level. Okay, so we've had a presentation from Michelle. The actions that we require are consider the attached report and determine whether the board supports the recommendation of the executive, and secondly, agree any additional comments which I'm sure have been captured by Democratic Services to be passed on to the executive in relation to this item. Can we agree on all of that? Yep. Please indicate. Anybody against? Any abstentions? No, that's carried. Thank you. Okay, we now move on to item 11, which is the Scrutiny Committee Work Programme, to receive a report which sets out the work programme of adults and community wellbeing and health scrutiny. Okay, do you want to start off with the adults and community wellbeing? Hugo?
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to just highlight two items of previous work. Recruitment and retention of adult social care staff. A recurring theme at the committee's meeting is the recruitment and retention of adult social care staff. On the 6th of April, which is page 144 of the pack, we are considering an item on how the sector is promoting adult social care as a career. Essentially, adult social care providers cannot compete with some of the hourly rates offered in other sectors, such as retail or hospitality. So their plans are looking at promoting this type of career, as well as addressing some of the particular shortages in the east and south of the county. There is a lot to be done there, and I think Lincoln and everybody is working as an industry across Lincolnshire to try and address this situation a lot better and get a lot more connected. Talking to a carer that's left the industry the other day, the one thing I said, how do you like it going from a carer to working in Specsavers? And she said, do you know what? What I miss most of all is actually the hours within that sector, starting at 7 and done by 2, 3 o'clock. She said, that was great. And the people in the sector, you know. And I think that they're sort of bits that we often don't pick up on and promote well, but we are looking at this as a whole. The other area which we've talked about today quite a bit is budget, monitoring and financial outturns. Technically we've been sort of gazumped today by the updates of everything, but from a point of view of adults, we are on budget. We did have an underspend, and we're very attentive to detail with it. But I will just say that even when we have an underspend of 2.4 million, that is only equivalent to something like 1 or 2 home care day provided expense. So it shows in the scale of things, it seems a lot, but actually it's very tight margins. Future work, we're looking at all age obesity. Around 63 of adults in England are above a healthy weight, and in Lincolnshire the figure stands at 68%. Around half of those overweight are defined as obese. Obesity can lead to a number of preventative conditions such as type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, along with risks of certain cancers. As part of the item on the 7th of September, all age obesity, we shall be considering the causes of obesity such as poor diet and inactivity and the local services available to address it. Now, and why we've gone all age obesity, it's something like 80% of children that develop overweight and obesity take it through to adults. So when you look at adults, 80% of adult obesity has actually come from childhood years. So we need to look at it as an all age and take a better approach. There are quite a lot of things now in place. We need to make sure that the delivery model fits the strategy in order to help support and deliver. And finally, market sustainability and fair cost of care. We have organised an additional meeting scheduled for the 28th of September. We are considering the item as a requirement of the Council to submit to the Department of Health and Social Care by the 14th of October 2022 this year, evidence of its work in preparing for the government's Fair Cost of Care initiative. This will include extensive details of the local cost of social care and a provisional market sustainability plan. This will be a first of a series of items as the Council prepares for its role from 2023, maintaining an account of the expenditure by each individual on their personal social care cost. This is huge, and actually we keep up to date with this at adults. We are fed the development work, and at the minute I have to say we're very pleased with the way the direction of travel is and the way that we are gathering the information. It has huge impacts and we need to get this right, and it is good to see that we are pulling in the right direction. So that's where we are currently, Chairman. Any questions? Happy to take them.
Any questions? Yep. Marianne.
Just a thought that if the government did want to drop anything, that might be one of them, which would be quite useful, I think, because it's going to be very difficult to afford when we can hardly afford the current provisions that we have to make. So we'll have to, we'll see what happens. Thank you.
I think there will be decisions to be made by whoever takes it over, and everybody is screaming for something, so we shall see what comes of it. But there's one thing is I think there is sympathy from the public on this to reform and sort of shape it in some form and another. So Boris has set the scene running, so we'll see what happens.
Thank you. Any more questions? Points to make? Okay. I just want to ask one question, Hugo, and it's about the issue that you raised about 80% of adults who were obese were obese as children. And on the 7th of September, when it was discussed, there was the notes was to advise the Committee of Initiatives to support weight reduction across all ages. So I wonder what Children's Services are doing about it as a Scrutiny Committee, and we haven't got the chair here, but perhaps, Debbie, can you help? Do you know whether or not that information has been transmitted?
I'm not aware. I mean, clearly it does cover both of the committees, so I'll take it offline with Nicola and look at how, then engage with the chairs around how we can make sure that happens.
I'll just come in on that one as well, Rob, because Rob Kendrick is chairman of Children's Scrutiny, and we've both been aligned to this sort of obesity approach. And so we are trying to organise it between the sort of two service sectors. There is a game plan in place. It gets really quite difficult. We do weights and measures, but you can't just say to a child, you're overweight, you need to sort it out. It gets complicated because there is emotional scarring if you don't handle it right. And at the same time, we can't just load down the people that go in with the weights and measures with leaflets, because they will then sort of say, well, hold on, it's not my job to become a distributor of leaflets. So, but I think there is more that we can do, and actually it's about how can we find something and raise awareness. And it is diet, and it's also activities, and it's also actually time management really comes quite a key to it, because I speak to people about it, and it does causes feathers when you raise the thing. If you're not careful, you can get branded as fat shaming, and actually you're not necessarily trying to do that. You're trying to actually address what lies behind that causes the issues. And it's like somebody said to me, do you know, I just don't have time. You know, I've got a kid, I've got to do this, I get back. I love to exercise, but it's just running out of time all the time. And it does, I run, and it's trying to put everything in, never mind walking the dog as well. So it is complicated, but we are working together, and this is why we have picked it up, to really try and see if we can't actually get hold of this and actually deal and address it and somehow make a significant difference.
Thank you. Nobody else want to comment? Okay. Can we move on to Health Scrutiny Committee? Carl, can you present your report?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll just start at the beginning. I'd like to confirm as an introductory point that there have been some changes to NHS organisations since my last report. Clinical commissioning groups were abolished on the 30th of June, and from the 1st of July, the Lincolnshire Integrated Care Board was established. Looking at the previous work we have done, I would also like to highlight 3 items of the previous work. Starting with GP services, as is set out on page 150 of the report pack, on the 13th of April, the committee considered 2 items on GP provision. In the first one, some forthright views were put forward on behalf of the Lincolnshire Local Medical Committee, which represents Lincolnshire's GPs. The former CCG also presented a paper on how they support GP practices. We heard that there is going to be a continuation of the emphasis on nurses and advanced care practitioners supporting GPs in their surgeries. However, access to GP appointments remains a key concern for our local communities, and where people cannot get appointments, they tend to go to A&E or an urgent treatment centre, thus putting more pressure on those services. GP access is going to be considered again in October. We then looked at reconfiguration of 4 services. On page 152, you will see that in June we considered the decision of the NHS in Lincolnshire to reconfigure 4 NHS services, which were orthopaedics, urgent and emergency care in Grantham, acute medicine also in Grantham, and stroke services. This followed a consultation exercise during the autumn of 2021. The committee had recorded its concerns on the centralisation of services in its response to the consultation. In June, we recorded our disappointment with the decision, but will be seeking a report on the implementation plans, which includes a requirement for £7.5 million of capital funding to make the changes to the stroke services. We also covered dental services, which is set out on pages 152 in June, and we considered an update in NHS dental services in Lincolnshire. There are some parts of Lincolnshire where it is very difficult to access NHS dentists. For example, in Mablethorpe and other parts of the East Coast. The NHS dental contract is part of the problem in that dentists receive the same payment under the contract whether they perform 1 or 10 fillings on a patient. This has been a disincentive for dentists moving to the area where dental services have not been present. A recent government announcement looks like this contract issue might be addressed. However, this will not address some of the capacity issues, and a further report will be coming forward in January. Looking towards the future, I would like to draw the committee's attention to the 2 items on our agenda for the 14th of September. Firstly, the consultation on mental health rehabilitation services, as we are planning to receive a report on the plans for the reconfiguration of the mental health rehabilitation service, which will see the closure of the unit in Grantham and the enhancement of services provided in the community. The committee will make arrangements to respond to the consultation. And secondly, consultation on the Spalding GP surgery. There are 3 practices in Spalding, and the Lincolnshire Integrated Care Board is consulting on what is called a managed list dispersal for one of these surgeries. These GP services are currently provided at the Johnson Hospital by the Lincolnshire Community Health Services Trust, which has indicated that it does not wish to renew the contract, which it has held since 2018. The committee will also be responding to this consultation, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Excuse me, questions? Yeah. Councillor Brockway.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thanks to Councillor Macy for this. I'm very, very pleased to see that there is going to be some emphasis on the work of the dental services in October and in January. Purely by coincidence, I've had 2 entirely separate calls from residents. One person in extreme agony over a period of several weeks who has been completely unable to access a dental service. And I think the impact, you know, anybody who's suffered any dental pain knows that the impact of that is very significant. And we also know that poor dental health impacts on heart health. So, you know, we've got big implications here. What I'm wondering is, how soon are we able to consider trying to improve access to people who perhaps can't afford the services? I know that there's access at just under £24 for a first appointment, but then any future appointments, people have to pay extra for the services. And access to NHS dentistry free is for a very limited number of people. Okay, but even for those people who can afford to access, they can't get the service. They're being left in pain in and around Lincoln and Lincolnshire, and I wonder what we can do to improve this. I don't know, Councillor Macy, whether you can come in on that. It's a biggie, isn't it? It really is a biggie.
I'm sure you can sort that, Carl. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I would certainly love to be able to sort that out. Unfortunately, it's incredibly difficult. I think the advice that I would have for any resident is to ring 111 because there are emergency access dentists. You'll probably have to travel quite substantially to go and see one, but with tooth pain, I think sometimes people feel that it's certainly worthwhile and they will try and get you as close as home as possible. It will be coming down to our local ICB, ICSs and so on for them to be playing more of an active role, which I think will be hugely helpful. We've seen it before when we've had our NHS England colleagues in, that at the moment in time they haven't even particularly looked at recruitment abroad, which seemed absolutely baffling to me. So having more of a local emphasis I think will help the situation. but it's going to be long term. There are no short term quick fixes, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Yep, Tom.
Thanks, Chair. Just briefly, Carl, and we both sit on scrutiny, so I won't go into great detail, but just on the issue of getting a GP appointment, I think we need to have a serious conversation of how that works, because, and I'm showing my age, when I was a very small lad, you could ring the doctor and say, oh, I've not got any appointments today, but I can see you tomorrow, the day after. They'd give you a time frame. Now, I try to use my local surgery, and it opens on Ask My GP from 8 in the morning. It was 10. Well, needed to arrange something when I came back. I couldn't get an appointment. It had been open 2 hours. Now, I suspect if I'd have even tried at 8:30, it would have been closed. Now, if you work shifts, if you work and you aren't retired, trying to get a doctor's appointment is virtually impossible. And I think we need to have a serious conversation with our NHS colleagues around actually the current system of, oh, we can only give you an appointment on the day, actually doesn't work. It doesn't work for people that work. It doesn't work for people who have other commitments, whether it's grandchildren or whatever else. And we need to have a real rational conversation around actually just as we are public servants to our electorate, they are servants to their catchment area of people they're meant to treat and look after. And the pressure is on A&E because actually you can't get to the GP even if you want to. And then you get chastised for going to A&E. Well, I've come to A&E because I can't see the GP. So I think we need a real conversation with our colleagues around actually the current system actually doesn't work, and we need to be able to, okay, well, we're not saying we're going to be seen in the next 2 days, but just say to us, oh, well, we've got an appointment in a week, can you make? Like you used to be able to, and I think people would appreciate that rather than just being told, oh, there's no appointments today, ring back tomorrow.
Comments, Carl?
Yeah, I can't disagree with what Councillor Smith said. You know, it's come up time and time again. I think probably as an individual councillor, one of the biggest complaints I get is access to GP services. The fact that you then can't book, you know, in a week's time, 2 weeks' time, whatever it is, if it's not urgent, I think is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, when we had them in front of us, we were told that they were overworked and underpaid. And they felt that that was a reasonable excuse, which I've no question of a doubt that some probably are overworked. But the great difficulty is they are a private business, and at the end of the day, they're funding from the NHS, but they are not working in the same way as our hospital trusts do and so on. However, we've got them in front of us in October, along with the ICB, ICS. We can ask this question and we can say, what is going to be done to try and improve the service going forward? Because at the moment, it isn't satisfactory. It's not right for our residents, and something's got to change.
Okay, could I just link the two things? So just be a moment, Marianne. Children's services and excuse me, and adult social care. Both of them could potentially, and I suggest maybe do, get impacted by some of the inability of the NHS to deliver its services. And I wonder, just from an adult social care point of view, which I know is not your responsibility, but do you get a feeling that the health services difficulties is putting, would you assess the likelihood of it increasing demand on our adult social care and children's services?
I think it depends what side of the equation you sit on. I think that health colleagues may say sometimes that the pressure comes from the county side of things, and on the other side we feel that the pressure's from there. So I think it's incredibly difficult to juggle that. What's useful is, I think, with having Simon that sits across adults as well as health, we do have the conversations flowing between ourselves and Hugo, and if we feel that there is something there that both committees need to look at, such as that, we can bring it to there.
Do you want to say anything, Hugo, on that?
Yeah, I mean, I sit on the Health and Wellbeing Board, and actually at the same time as we all bang our heads together, because fundamentally this is driven by central government in a structure that is so rigid that we can't actually adapt and be flexible. And actually we talk about GPs. I mean, actually mine deal with it now on a phone call with a nurse, because some of the times I know exactly what I need and I don't need to go and see a doctor. But actually, so we are streamlining in effect slowly, and unless, you know, as we all say, you can sit and talk to Glenn and everybody, unless we get some form of unity within social care and NHS from the very top driven down this sort of, we're going to go through a very, very painful, slow transformation, if not death of services as well, because it's at busting point now, and the only way you're going to streamline it is by, you've got to change.
Thanks. Anyone else? Yeah, Marianne, sorry.
Fine, thank you. I absolutely agree and support with all of what's been said, and I'm really pleased that you've taken a firm line on it. So thank you very much indeed for that. Some solutions that we, I don't know if I dare mention, but I used to be on the Primary Care Trust, and in those days we were able to employ directly GPs, and maybe that's a way forward if this new body has the powers, this ICBS, the Integrated Care Body, it may actually be that they can use some of those solutions. Also, actually going abroad, as you said, we used to run sessions in Spain or wherever, and encourage those people about what a nice life they can have here, working for us. And that might be a way forward as well. And I think the point about the current situation is that we all know that if you don't give the right care at the right time, worse is to come. If you don't look after people's teeth, they're going to rot. And then you've got real big problems and urgent problems, and even risk of septicemia. It's just not acceptable, as you said, and I'm really pleased. Thank you for taking that strong line on that. It's simply not good enough, and that's why it is essential that we really take this the bull by the horns and really get to grips with it. So all power to your elbow, and anything I can do to help, please let us know. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Councillor Carrington, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would like to come back to the issue of GPs. I had recently a conversation with a very senior clinician in accident and emergency, and it was quite clear from the view that they put forward that there is a belief in A&E that GP surgeries are almost willfully offloading patients that should be seen in the local surgery to A&E, that they have, and I'm paraphrasing what I was told, that in the past couple of years in the course of the pandemic, there's been a sort of cultural shift where they become more and more unwilling to see individual patients. Now, I'm not a clinician in A&E, so I'm not in a position to judge that. And the last thing I would want to do is suggest that we do not value those who work in general practice, either as GPs or as nurses. But the fact is that, as others have observed, the system simply is not working. We have the hangover from 1948 that, as has been commented on already, individual GP surgeries are individual private businesses. They are not, they take the money from the NHS, but they are not subject to the same level of control. And I've had this conversation with senior members of the new Integrated Care Board when they were back in CCGs. I think that there is a strong argument, and I'd be interested if Councillor Macy's committee could pursue this, that we simply try and change that model, because the existing model is not working. There are plenty of sources, for example, my own district council, I'm dual-hatted, who could happily provide the logistical framework, in other words, new health centres, in which new practices could be established, because often existing ones are in very unsuitable premises which are too small or too old. I think we do have to look at something radical here. If the model is not working, then let's explore how on earth we can change the model, because simply stumbling on as we are is not good enough for the residents that we all serve. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm sure a lot of us would agree with that. In fact, we had something that similar to what you're talking about with a drop-in centre in Lincoln on Monks Road. And the NHS locally decided that that wasn't a good way of using resources. I think a lot of people would disagree, particularly now in the current climate. Eddie.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I agree with your last comment about Monks Road. That was a disgrace closing that place. And they'd rather spend their money on managers looking after diversity and things like that. I know it's easy to generalise about doctor surgeries, and I'm sure that most of you are right about that, but I think sometimes it's a bit subjective, because I've accessed my medical centre, my surgery, Birchwood Medical Centre, for about 5 times in the last 12 months for various bits that are dropping off me, obviously, due to my age. The thing is, I've never had a problem getting an appointment. And I just think, you know, it's easy to generalise, and, you know, the whole thing is doom and gloom. But it's not the same for every surgery. And I find it, you know, I can't generalise my own particular medical practice the way that it seems to be going. I agree that there may be a problem, and there may be a lot of surgeries that are not doing what Birchwood is doing. And, you know, I'm sure we've got the same high density of people with medical health problems in Birchwood as in most of the other parts of the county. But certainly it hasn't ever been a problem for me, and I just thought I'd make that comment. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. It's much appreciated. Yeah, Hilton.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of brief comments. I agree with Councillor Carrington and Councillor Stengel particularly, but what Councillor Overton said about taking a hard line on a particular issue, I want to talk about that in slightly different context. I don't have any problem with accessing my health services, either through Ask My GP or appointments more or less when needed. But the general public have to take some responsibility for the state of GP practices. The number of appointments missed every month, 70, 80. Roll that out through the entire city, through the entire county. How many appointments are being missed? And I think somebody along the line, if I might suggest to Councillor Macy, we ought to be looking at that and finding out what can happen, what can we do to encourage people to either let the doctor know that they can't come, but in which case that's fair enough if you can't go because you've got a good reason, that's understandable. But just missing appointments, like I say, some surgeries, some practices, 70 or 80 appointments a month. No wonder an A&E get snowed under, but the public have to take some responsibility for their service, for the National Health Service. And I do think somebody somewhere ought to take a hard line on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Alex, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see why we don't charge people £5 per appointment. You know, that'd solve a lot of the problems, wouldn't it? I mean, look what they've done with carrier bags. That's only 5 pence. Think what happened with £5, you know. Just a thought. £10, Hilton. Do I hear £10 over there?
I think since 1948, the National Health Service has been working on the principles of medical services free at the point of use, and that's a big decision to actually charge. Yeah, Marianne.
Chairman, I think
it's not a point of order. You can just say nice
well,
things.
well, I mean, I don't think anybody here was arguing that there ought to be a charge. Let's be quite clear about that. We don't want to be too political, do we? But the only charge we were talking about, Alex was talking about charging for appointments. I talked about missing appointments. We're not talking about charging people for any services.
Oh, I am. I think £5 for every doctor's appointment.
Thanks, both of you. Really. Now, somebody else wanted to speak. Marianne again.
Thank you. The cost approach versus the performance. One of the things that used to be is that they had to look at the performance of the NHS as a priority. And so if you have to keep people healthy, then you have to provide services that are accessible and close to people where they live. And indeed, that's why we opened that Monks Road one when I was on the board. And also the emergency one at the doorway of the hospital as well, that one, so that if you could be immediately redirected, we can't see you here, but oh, actually you need to go there. So it's triaged right at the front. So they never got into A&E if they didn't need it. And actually all they needed was a GP. There was one ready. So the other point, though, I think the problem that the health service sometimes has is that they're looking at costs, and it's the same as we did per borrowed library book. If you look at per person accessing the service and say, well, that service is costing, you know, so many pounds per visit, therefore it's not cost effective and we'll close it. And these are the two approaches, you know, whether you go for making sure that you've got the really good service for people or whether you prioritise the costs. And I think this is why we need to focus on making sure that we think about the people that we're serving. I'm not going to go into the missing appointments. Thank you. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, fine. That was a healthy debate on, yes, on health. Okay, so we've had reports from Hugo and Carl. On page 141, we can see the actions required. Are we satisfied with the activity undertaken since the 24th of March by both of the adults, community and health? Do we determine that we're satisfied with the planned work programme of both of them? And thirdly, the board is requested to note the activity of the health scrutiny for Lincolnshire's 3 working groups: pharmaceutical needs assessment, quality accounts and suicide prevention and mental health. If we're happy with that, can we vote in favour then, please? Any abstentions? Anybody voting against? No. That's determined that. The final item on the agenda is the overview and scrutiny management board work programme, which is there to note. Thank you for your attendance. Declare the meeting closed.